Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Around the World in 80 Stays. I am here today with Sean Hagan. As always, I'm going to let him introduce himself and where he studied.
Yeah, so my name is Sean Hagan. I'm from Coralville, Iowa. So grew up so far away from here, 15 minutes. Crazy. I'm a double major in Russian language and international relations, and I've studied abroad 3 times. Once in Batumi, Georgia, once in Riga, Latvia, and then I went back to Georgia in 2025 to Tbilisi.
So I did not actually know that you were a 3-timer a study abroad thing. You keep
Yeah.
it way more on the down low than I do.
Yeah, I try not to be too insufferable about it.
Whereas this Sean, I think, has made it almost too much of his personality. So I'm assuming that your travels to Latvia and Georgia have something to do with your Russian studies, but I want to just ask, why Georgia? And I want to specifically kind of talk about your time in Tbilisi and in Georgia specifically, because I brought you here knowing that you only went to Georgia. Latvia kind of came out of nowhere, but talk to me about that.
Yeah, so, I didn't know that I was going to study Russian, for my academic career until I went to Georgia the first time to Batumi. That was a 6-week program. And I didn't speak any Russian before I went there. I stayed with the host family. They didn't speak any English. My teachers didn't speak any English. And probably less than half of the service workers in the city spoke English. So it was really tough, but I just kind of immediately fell in love with it and decided to study it. And then when I went back to Georgia for the spring semester, that was a 4-month program. It was both for studying Russian and international relations. So I was earning credit for both of my majors, and I figured, I love Georgia so much, I might as well just study there and get the same amount of progress towards my majors.
So you went first and it was so good, you had to come back. But again,
Yeah.
I'm just kind of why Georgia? Why go back to Georgia? What drew you to Georgia? I get that studying Russian options are very limited in our current political climate. But yeah, why go back to Georgia?
It was just, it's kind of hard to put it into words, but it's such an amazing place. I really, really love the Georgian people. And the food, of course. It's renowned for its food. It was so good. And it was the most beautiful country I'd ever been to. So it was kind of hard when I was thinking about studying abroad again. It was so good the first time, I couldn't think of anywhere that would be better.
That's an interesting take, because I know a lot of people, and myself included, who had amazing experiences in amazing countries, but whenever we get the opportunity to study abroad or to go again, we back off, or the general consensus is just kind of back off because, oh no, what if we can't repeat the magic? We would love to do it over again, but what if the magic isn't there,
Yeah, part of my reasoning for going back was the fact that the first time around I was in Batumi, which is kind of like Las Vegas but in Eastern Europe. So, some of the magic wasn't quite there. I would see it when I would travel around, and I only spent a couple days in Tbilisi just, flying in and then getting ready to go to Batumi and then again on the way out. And I really liked what I saw during those 3 days that I was there. And I figured spending 4 months in Tbilisi would be different enough from Batumi, and it would probably be a lot more interesting because, but Batumi is kind of just this high scale, flashy place where people go to party and gamble. But
and you're like, I'm 18 and broke.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was, it's if you want a really deep immersion into the culture, it's not really the place to go.
So let's move to just your second time when you were in Tbilisi, because I think that's more relevant to the general studying abroad and stuff than just kind of being plopped in West Asia's Vegas. But so you had talked about this in class. Sean and I are in class together where Georgia did come out, and you talked about your host family experience. Talk about your host family in Tbilisi, especially kind of the second time around, now that you knew what all was coming, and maybe not necessarily what was expected of you, but what you could bring to the table now, having done something before in Georgia.
Yeah. So I'll talk about my host family, the people first. So I was living with a really, really cool family. So the mom is like a national treasure. She's like a super famous actress within Georgia. She starred in its most popular series of movies and TV shows. They're like rom-coms. And the dad is like an art film director. So they were sort of like the cultural elite, not the economic elite. They were the cultural elite, and they lived a pretty modest life. But they were like renowned within Georgia, and they were just super cool people. And I think in terms of preparation, like the second time around, the culture shock was not nearly as bad. And they were just really lovely people to talk to, and my Russian had gotten better. So, I spent a ton of time with them just talking about all sorts of stuff. I would talk about life here in Iowa and sort of cultural comparisons between here and Georgia. It was super interesting. It was probably the most valuable part of the cultural exchange happened with them.
Did they like sit you down and we're like, okay, we're gonna watch one of host mom's films, or like host dad's like, I'm working on a project, we're gonna watch this evening?
Yeah, well, she was never that insistent. I mean, she did like sit me down. It's like, we're gonna watch some Georgian films, but it was more like older stuff that was more like serious. But there was one time where I was with a big group of friends, and we were hanging out at this one guy's house who was like on the opposite side of the city, and we came in, like, took a pit stop at my host family on the way to this like techno club, and we were just stopping to like charge our phones and stuff. And my host mom just like insisted, like, no, all of you guys are gonna have like tea and biscuits. And then she put on like an episode of the show she was in to like show everyone. So I don't know. She was pretty humble about it, but yeah, there was like one time where I guess she had an audience, and she was just like, here you guys go, check this out.
Check this out, the pride of the Georgian film scene. Well, I want to ask about the remark you made of they were the cultural elite but not the economic elite, because usually being a cultural elite in that you're a famous actress and famous film director and producer implies that you have a pretty good amount of economic standing and a good amount of money, but I'm assuming it's different based off of your comment there.
Yeah, it's hard to give a super in-depth analysis when I haven't I haven't studied this extensively, but my impression when I was there was that the difference between the poor and the rich was not nearly as wide as it is here. And so they were very successful people, but they lived a pretty like middle-class life. Like, they owned their home. It was a pretty nice home, but they weren't living in like a mansion or anything like that. And I think they made decent money, but it's not like what Hollywood stars here make, where they live in like multi-million-dollar properties and stuff. There's only like one billionaire in the country, and like everyone hates him. So
Okay.
they don't really idolize like the sort of like the glamour and the materialism as much.
Interesting. And was their house like in the city proper, like around the
Yeah.
city proper? So they weren't out like Beverly Hills Mansion kind of thing,
No.
like with the people.
No, they sort of have like mixed income housing, so it's like the people who are better off live in the same areas as people who are poor. And if you're like successful, you don't go and like isolate yourself in the suburbs or like out in the countryside. So they lived basically like in the middle of like the old town area, like right by the Parliament building, and like they just like hung out with their neighbors all the time.
That's interesting. I want to pick your brain on that just a little bit more, of a mixed income kind of housing area. What was just the neighborhood and the interactions like? Because I think that's something that's very hard for us in the U.S. to really like quantify and envision, of like, people from all different classes living in each other, where it's more like, oh, if I have money, I can afford
Yeah.
to have my own space now.
Yeah, I mean, I will say it was like a nicer neighborhood. Like the poorest of the poor people in Tbilisi didn't live in that area, but there was a variety of different types of apartments that were all different qualities and sizes. A lot of the urban housing environment, they sort of build apartments around like a communal courtyard, and so you're kind of forced to see your neighbors all the time, and that leads to like organic interaction. And then they tend to have like pretty high social capital because they know all of their neighbors and they're all on good terms and they hang out at each other's houses all the time. So during the 90s, during like the civil wars, they lived in that same house, and there was a good, I think she said there was like 6 months to a year where there was basically no electricity or gas. It was just like a year-long total blackout. Like the entire grid was down, at least in their area. And everybody who lived around their courtyard would pool together whatever food they could find, and then they would cook it over a campfire in the courtyard and share it. And that's like, if that happened in America, people would be shooting their neighbors, you know? It seems to me that because of how tight-knit their communities are, they really support each other a lot in a way that was just, like, I've never heard or seen of anything like that back here.
I was going to comment, too, that I've never heard of a communal, like, courtyard kind of thing, because in some European cities and styles of living, you have the main square, which was the town, but people didn't necessarily like live there per se, but on a community, neighborhood by neighborhood, block by block basis.
Yeah.
That, I think, is a really cool and novel concept, or novel, I guess, to us, of community building. Because you're right, that would never work here, never in a million years.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, the architecture does affect the social landscape a lot, though. I think if we had architecture like that, you know, we would probably see higher trust communities forming. It's just that people live, like, even out in the countryside in the villages, people tend to put their houses really close to each other because they just like being around people. And I think that, like, physical landscape where you interact with these people all the time, and, like, every house and apartment has a balcony there, and that's, like, where you go to hang out when you have some downtime, but they're always facing into the courtyard. So when people are just hanging out and they have some free time, they're able to see each other, and they sort of have this, like, organic, they have, like, very organic social interactions. They don't really have to go out of their way for it.
So you can't gossip very well because the whole hood's going to hear it if you're out there on the balcony in front of everyone.
You know, I heard some gossip from some of the neighbors. I couldn't quite catch what they were talking about. It was in Georgian, but somebody did something, and everyone could hear about it.
Oh, goodness. I want to ask about the Georgian people, too, and just kind of the Georgian lifestyle, because, again, that's a place that we really don't know anything about. If anyone knows anything about Georgia, the country, it's just like, oh, yeah, Stalin's from there. And then, like, you know, don't they speak Russian? Like, isn't it just... But talk about the Georgian people and the Georgian lifestyle.
Yeah, the Georgian lifestyle is really interesting. Every culture says this, that, like, family comes first.
Family and food.
Yeah, oh, in my culture, we hate our family, and I have never eaten. No, I'm just kidding. The family unit is very strong. Like, people tend to live with their parents basically until they get married, or, like, even afterwards. And there's very large, like, extended families, almost kind of like a clan structure. It's not quite that rigid, but it's sort of reminiscent of that. And so you'll have, like, a huge family network of, like, cousins and aunts and uncles and second cousins and whatever that keep in regular contact. Most of not all families will do stuff like making wine together. Georgia's the birthplace of wine, and they're very proud of it. So basically, nearly every family will produce their own, like, family brand of wine just for their own personal consumption. Most of the time, they don't even sell it. And pretty much everybody grows food of some kind, even in the city. So people will have, like, planter boxes on their balconies. And there's just wild grapevines growing all over the city. Just when they're ripe, anybody can just have them. But yeah, they're huge on, like, self-reliance. I think partially out of necessity, but it is a really cool sort of way of life where they have big, well-connected, supportive families to help take care of each other, and then they produce a ton of their own. They meet their own needs without relying on too much outside support or, like, supply chains or anything like that.
That's a really interesting structure of doing things, of self-sufficiency through almost a collectivism within the family. And the fact that they have their own wines that they just
Yeah.
self-produce did you come home from school one day and your host mom was like, oh yeah, I'm just down making the wine or whatever for the
Yeah.
month, don't mind me?
Yeah, so my immediate host family weren't actually the ones who produced the wine, because the daughter of the couple I stayed with, she had moved out. She had her own family and everything. She and one of her daughters actually had university level education in winemaking.
Whoa.
So yeah, they have winemaking universities there, which is super cool. So they would be the ones to make it, and I went out to their house in the suburbs, and they showed me their cellar that was just this big like distillery.
How good was your family's wine specifically?
Dude, it was excellent, and a lot of the like homemade stuff, it tends to be pretty low alcohol percentage, and it tastes really good. So it's kind of something you sip on to enjoy, and it's excellent.
That was going to be my ask of like, how does it compare to other worldly wines, shall we say?
Yeah, the Georgian style of winemaking it's been modified, but the core concept is exactly the same as it was like 9,000 years ago when they started doing it, where they have a pot buried underground and they pour grape juice with some yeast in there, and it's completely natural. There's no chemicals in it, there's no sulfates or whatever. It's pretty much entirely unprocessed, and it just has such a good like natural taste. Like there's nothing inorganic in it.
I mean, that sounds like kind of a fun thing to maybe go try. Is just, all right, let's go dig a hole in my backyard, get a pot or a jar, and then see what wine we can make out of that. That's really, really cool.
Yeah. I mean, and there's tons of skill in it. I don't mean to minimize it at all. You have to really know what you're doing, but it's a high skill but very low tech way of doing it, which I think is cool.
I again really had no knowledge of anything Georgian at all, but that's really cool to hear. Like French wine, Italian wine, South American wine takes up all the air, but I want in on, and I don't even really like wine that much, but I want in on the Georgian wine game.
Yeah, and some of it's a bit of an acquired taste. Like a lot of it tends to be drier, but there's such a huge variety that like you can find something you like. It's so difficult to find outside of Georgia. I think pretty much the only place where it exists in any meaningful quantity outside of Georgia is Russia. So like I remember seeing it one time at the Russian grocery store here in Iowa City. Shout out Eurofood. They had it one time. I saw it. I didn't have my ID on me. I came back like 2 days later. It was gone.
Oh my gosh.
I've been searching for it for 3 years.
Oh my gosh. How much did it cost? That's got to be a pretty penny to import that, surely.
Yeah, I have no idea how much it costs. I didn't even look at the price tag. Whatever it was, I would have paid it. But
you saw Georgian said sold.
Yeah, and just through poor planning, I couldn't do it, man.
I need to stop down to Eurofoods again. I went back there in May. They had some kind of special Russian caviar when I was there that was like $5. I was like, all right, whatever, we'll do that. But I do like going there when I can because I think it's fun. So Georgian wine is definitely on the list now.
Yeah, if you're in a bigger city, you might be able to find it, and if you can, you have to.
I remember the weirdest thing to me was I went to a winery in Argentina that made like a very specific mark. It was out in Western Australia. Nope, Western Argentina. There we go. It was in Western Argentina. It was a very specific mark, and I found one of their like subsidiary brands in Aldi for $6 a bottle.
Wow.
I was like, no way. I'm not.
Yeah.
It won't be nearly as good. I'm not paying $6 for that. But I was just like, that's crazy that this one place that I went to, one of their subsidiaries and marks, made it to an Aldi in Iowa.
Yeah, man, globalism's kind of crazy, man. I mean, I just hope that Georgia kind of is able to break into the market a little bit so we can see some Georgian wine at Aldi. That would be a dream come true.
That would be amazing. I would love to get a text from you in 5 years that's like, yo, you'll never guess what I found. Maybe in like European Aldi. we could find Georgian wine? Maybe in like an Aldi
Yeah.
in Germany or something.
I'm willing to bet like a Romanian Aldi would have it because it's just across the pond.
100%, 100%. I wanna keep us moving. As great as the lecture on Georgian wine is, I'm gonna need to do
Yeah.
some research afterwards. That was really good. I did not know that. So you were there like learning Russian, but then
Hmm.
obviously Georgian
Yeah.
is a completely separate non-affiliated language too.
Yeah.
What was it like navigating with the English that you had? Because I'm sure Tbilisi had a good amount of English, but
Yeah.
also Russian, but also trying to, pick up and learn Georgian just because.
Yeah, at times it was kind of crazy. The Georgian I did learn, I mean, it's so difficult. It is such a difficult language, but even the little bit I did pick up while I was there went such a long way. But it was pretty frequent that I would have a conversation in all three languages at the same time. I'd start off in Georgian, kind of be respectful. I'm in their country. I'm gonna try to learn their language, but when it would run out, I would ask, do you speak English or Russian? And good amount of the time we just cycled between all three throughout the conversation. I had one time where I was speaking all three plus French.
Plus French?
Yeah, it's a super multilingual region. It's a crossroads, and it historically always has been. So you just encounter a lot of different languages there.
How did you feel that your Russian grew between the first and the last time you were there? I get a stay in Latvia was kind of in the middle,
Yeah.
but even still, just being around a different, not like dialect, but just environment of Russian.
Yeah, I mean, it improved massively because, like, I made progress when I was there, but I started with 0 and I only had 6 weeks. I'd say by the end of my most recent, the 2025 study abroad, I wouldn't say that I'm fluent, but my Russian improved so much while I was there because I would spend just hours every day speaking it in class. It's an immersive class. You speak Russian the whole time. And then I would go home and spend another like 2 to 3 hours a day just talking with my host mom about any topic under the sun. Yeah, it improved quite a bit. It was a little bit harder to use it in public, though. Russia invaded and occupied 20% of their territory, so understandably they're not huge fans of Russia and the Russian language. So it was a bit limited in opportunities outside of the classroom and outside of the home, but I'd say probably about 30% of my interactions were in Russian, so I made a ton of progress.
That's really, really cool. Again, that you're having just this really immersive experience of being able to like, all right, I know that it's not the most accepted thing, but I'm trying to, and I'm still just wanting to learn through what I'm
Yeah.
able to get, and making the most of your time and opportunity.
Yeah, well, that's where the Georgian was so unbelievably helpful, was because people would know that I was trying, and then if we had to switch to Russian, they wouldn't fault me for that. Almost nobody bothers to even learn how to say like hello or thank you.
How what is it? What is a Georgian sentence? Give us a Georgian sentence.
Gamar joba mevarshoni mevar Amerikidan vichide Tbilisi memomson Sakartvelo.
Okay, I only got Sakartvelo, which is in Tbilisi, which is
Yeah.
the name of Georgia in Georgian. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming you didn't curse out my mother and my family when saying that.
No. I also realized I definitely said something wrong there. I'm a little rusty, as you can imagine. There's no opportunities to practice here, but yeah.
Georgians in Iowa City, greater Iowa City area, hit my man Sean Hagan
Yes,
up.
please hit me up. I need to practice with you.
Do you go to like Russian conversation hours or like the Russian stuff here?
Yeah, I do. I don't have any Russian classes to take right now. They just didn't have any to offer me, so I go to like Russian conversation hours, and sometimes I just like practice with people online.
What is it? I'm trying to remember. I have a friend who's half Russian, and he took Russian lessons all throughout our childhood and when we knew each other. But he told me one time that there's, what is it, 3 or 4 words in Russian for the color blue, depending on the shade that it is. Am I correct with that?
Yeah, I mean the only ones I know are Galuboy and Sini. I'm sure there's others like something, like in English we have like teal and turquoise. I'm sure they have stuff like that, but yeah, they don't consider dark blue and light blue to be the same color.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough.
That's like other than, swearing and a couple other like hello and
Yeah.
all that. Like that's the only thing that I can remember having picked up from Russian. So I want to switch us gears a little bit from the language as well, but it is cool that you got to learn Georgian too, and we're definitely using Georgian. Again, Georgians in the greater Iowa City area, hit Sean Hagan up. But what was it like traveling around Georgia, being in Georgia? Because Tbilisi is a very historic and great international city, but you said, some rural areas where farmers they got houses all close together with each other.
Yeah.
And what was the rural community or some of your other travels within Georgia like? And then I feel like you said this in class, but did you go to, not like go into, but like, did you go see Abkhazia and South Ossetia when you were there?
Actually, well, sort of yes and no. I got really close to both borders. I think I actually did see into South Ossetia a little bit, and I believe I saw just like a little bit into Abkhazia, but both of those areas are up in the north where the greater Caucasus are. Those are the highest peaks in Europe. So lines of sight, sometimes you'll have just like a huge mountain range in front of you, and you know, 4 miles away on that side of the mountain, that's Russia, but you can't actually see it. So yeah, that's sort of how it was for Abkhazia and South Ossetia. It was like I was right there, but I couldn't really see much of it.
And I will give for context and for reference too. Again, I forget we're not doing this in the context of our class where people know about
Yeah.
Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Abkhazia and South Ossetia are like Russian-backed breakaway states within Georgia that are not
Yeah.
recognized, but Georgia can't really do anything about them because Russia just occupies and administers them. So
Yeah.
they just kind of sit there. There's, what is it, 6 countries recognize Abkhazia and South Ossetia as
Oh,
states?
I think it's less than that now. It's like 4 or 5 now, and it's like Venezuela, Syria, and then a couple Pacific Island countries that Russia just paid like $50 million to recognize it.
And you're just like, okay, do Georgians or like Georgians that you just spoke to like talk about Abkhazia or South Ossetia at all, or were they just like, whatever, Russians invaded?
Yeah, I mean, people didn't talk about it all the time. It's a very like sad. I mean, imagine if we lost the entire Great Lakes region and then like Northern California and the Pacific Northwest, some of the most beautiful parts of our country. Like, it's very sad. Like Abkhazia especially is like considered to be like the most beautiful region in the Caucasus and the Black Sea area. But when people did talk about it, it was always with an air of like sadness. Sometimes they would be like kind of wistful, like, when we get it back, it'll be great. But, people didn't talk about it that much.
Interesting. That again was not really a question for like, hey, if you're studying abroad in Georgia, you should go to Abkhazia. But that was just more kind of to satisfy my curiosity. But no, talk to me about some of the travels you did within Georgia.
Yeah, so I did some traveling around during my program, but once it was over, my parents and my girlfriend came out and we spent a month traveling like basically the entire country together. We didn't really spend much time in like the Batumi, like the southwest area, but we went to every other region, and we went to like all of the larger cities outside of Batumi. So we spent a lot of time in Svaneti. It's like the most mountainous region, and there's these like really small little villages up there. They have a lot of like livestock. They do a lot of like animal husbandry. And then interestingly enough, they have a huge skiing industry up there. And like backpacking and hiking. It's a very like underrated area, but they have a growing industry there for that. So they have a lot of hospitality, and in fact, we met a woman in a different area, but we met a woman who used to be a doctor in Tbilisi, and she started running a guest house because she earned more doing that. Yeah, in these little villages, the houses would be close together, and we'd be driving past, and it was always the men. They'd always be like later in the afternoon or the early evening when they were done with whatever they were doing for the day. They'd just all be hanging out together, just like standing around, smoking cigarettes, just watching the cars go by. There were animals everywhere. They don't really keep them penned in either. So, we'd be driving on these roads and we'd have to stop for a group of cows or sheep or pigs or whatever. And they have no fear. I mean, they take their sweet time getting out of the way.
Well, what is it? There's more cars in Georgia than people or animals or whatever the statistic is about all the cars there. So I wouldn't imagine they'd have too much fear.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, there are a lot of cars there. We learned about this in our class, actually, but one of the big industries in Georgia is basically taking wrecked cars that nobody can be bothered to repair, and then they fix them up and sell them for super cheap. So the traffic situation there is crazy. It is truly some of the worst driving I've ever seen in my life. A 2-lane road would sometimes become 3 or 4 lanes, and then you got the livestock wandering everywhere that you got to look out for, and people speeding all of the time. There was this one time we were driving up this mountain pass, and there was like a semi in front of us kicking up a huge cloud of dust because this was like a gravel road, and it was going around a curve, and this guy sped past going like 50 or 60 on this winding road, blind curve with a dust cloud, and it's like if there was someone coming, this person would have had no hope of stopping. And somehow I never saw a crash the whole time I was there. I don't know how they do it.
My dad's been to all over India on a couple of occasions, and he describes the traffic in India as jazz, in that there's no coherent structure to it, but somehow it all flows and everyone knows when to play their part.
That is exactly what it's like. That is a perfect analogy.
Of just so many cars and animals and humans, and it all flows together.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt on your travels thing, but where was the place with the again, we're just going to keep referencing class here. If you're a student, you need to take Outliers with Ambassador Ronald McMullen.
You have to.
You have to. That again, you'll get so much of this and many more, and you'll be inspired to go to great places like Georgia. I mean, Sean, you already went to Georgia beforehand, but still now I'm like, I want to go to Georgia. But what was the place with the tower and the crossbows that you talked about?
Oh, yeah. So that was the Svaneti region. So I'll do a little like ethnography of the region, I guess. So yeah, Svaneti is it's one of the far northern regions. It's actually nestled right between the 2 breakaway provinces. So you have Abkhazia, Svaneti, and then South Ossetia on the other side, and it's really remote. And the people there also speak like a specific dialect of the Georgian language. They're called the Svan people, and they speak the Svan language. And one of the interesting things about Svan culture is that it was a very strong clan system, and it actually sort of still is, but each sort of village would belong to a clan, and they would build these really impressive, like 50-foot tall towers, like little, skyscrapers, dating back to like between the 9th and 12th century. And that would be their like village defense, and most of them are still standing today. And the families whose like ancestors built them maintain them, and they're like a symbol of pride. And yeah, they're super cool. They're just everywhere out there.
Just tall mountain towers. That must be a really interesting thing, though, to be nestled between Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Like, oh boy.
Yeah, and then you got Russia on the northern border too. So it's like their only like connection to the outside world is going south.
One road to Tbilisi, and that's it.
I think there's only one highway that connects Svaneti to the rest of the country.
Oof, man, it sounds really cool, though. It sounds like a really cool place. And I mean, if you spend a month, not specifically in that region, but like a month just traveling within that region, then it's got to be good, right?
Yeah.
So I want to move us to some of your other travels, too, because you had said that you went to both Armenia and Azerbaijan as well.
Yeah.
Talk about the rest of South Caucasus and your experiences traveling around there and what you thought.
Yeah, I went to Armenia twice, grand total of like 11 days of travel there. And I think I spent 6 in Azerbaijan. So it's, basically just first impressions. That's not enough time to make a super like strong impression and like really get to understand the place. Azerbaijan was kind of a weird place. It's a very, very, it's a dictatorship, and it's a petro state. And they sort of like in Baku, the capital city, they basically just copied Barcelona and pasted it on the Caspian Sea.
Really?
Which was really strange because it just kind of felt like living in like a movie set or like in the Truman Show or something, where it's like this architecture, like it just seems out of place. Like it's not organic here. It's sort of a fake.
It's just super uncanny.
Yeah, it was very uncanny. And we also, when I was there was a dust storm blowing huge clouds of dust from like Kazakhstan back west into Azerbaijan. And then also like all the fumes from the offshore oil and gas rigs were blowing back in. So there was like nobody outside, and like I felt terrible the entire time. Like I was coughing up like black stuff. Yeah, and yeah, we saw hardly anybody. And like every public place was like empty.
Really? In your 6 days of being there, just nothing. Do you think like because of the storms, or just in general that like its movie settedness kind of is conducive to, okay, yeah, it's probably empty most of the time, or like people are in different places?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of both. It's I mean, it sounds from what I've heard that it's like it's fairly lively under normal circumstances, but it's still a movie set. And like they have these huge just oil wealth displays just to flex, and like these massive like glass towers, maybe like 4 floors of this like 100-floor building is actually being used, and the rest of it is just like just a display of wealth. And then just this like weird Spanish out of place architecture that doesn't really belong. It's just a strange place, man.
That's so. I'm gonna have to look at some pictures of that when we're done, because I love Barcelona. Barcelona is probably a top city in the world that I've ever traveled to. But oil Barcelona, that's fake. That would seem just so out of place in a way, if it's like as close as you're describing it. Was there anything, I don't know, fun and or interesting that you saw, experienced in Azerbaijan?
Oh yeah. I think honestly one of the coolest things, it was my least favorite destination that I've been to, but I think the coolest single thing that we did the entire time we were abroad was in Azerbaijan. We piled into these little Soviet cars. They're called Ladas. Super cute, super cool, just like boxy little Soviet cars. And they were just like buckets of bolts. Like they were so poorly maintained, but these Azerbaijani drivers just like raced us through the desert at like 70 miles per hour across the desert to go to this mud volcano. It felt like being in the primordial soup. You have this like bubbling mud volcano of like soil and nutrients, and then the sky overhead is like blacked out by these dust storms. It was like a lunar landscape, dude. It was crazy.
Because what's better than your health already being there coughing up black stuff than going to a volcano full of mud?
Yeah. Yeah, dude, it was epic.
What, like, when you got to the volcano after racing, did you just like look in and be like, ah, yeah, or like were you hiking around it or doing something, just like taking it all in? Because I feel like that's just something you just stand and be like, I can't believe this is real.
For me personally, I spent a good majority of the time just taking in the atmosphere and the scene, because it's I imagine like Titan or Io, one of those moons of the gas giants that's like volcanically active and has these thick atmosphere. It was just like an alien planet. So I spent most of the time just like taking that in. But some people like took some of the mud and like painted their faces with it. Apparently it's like good for your skin or whatever. There were also natural gas vents around, so I set one of those on fire.
Just because you can.
Yeah, I mean, well, like people had done it before. Like they had actually built a little like rock like windbreak around it so you could do it. So that's why I did it, is because it was like a thing people do. But
just another day in Azerbaijan, mud volcanoes, gas vents.
Azerbaijan apparently translates to like the land of fire, because there's just gas vents and like flammable gases coming out of the ground, going all the way back to like prehistory.
Sounds scary, sounds epic, but that does sound like a fun thing to do. It's just, let's go to some volcanoes in Azerbaijan and light some stuff on fire.
That was dope.
So let's switch over. Let's talk about Armenia now. What's the line on Armenia?
Yeah, Armenia was super cool. I had a really like positive impression of it. I really liked the people. I struck up some conversations with like locals there. They were really friendly and very like sincere and curious to talk to somebody from America.
They're like, what are you doing here?
Yeah, well, and then they were also like, why do you speak Russian? Most of the people I talked to were like old people, we'd be sitting on the same park bench and they would just start talking to me. And at first they would think I was like Russian or something, and they'd find out I was American, and they're like, "Why are you here and why are you speaking this language? So what went wrong in your life for you to be in this circumstance?" It was great though. Yerevan was a really cool city. Like Tbilisi's clubs are epic. Like the techno clubs there are super cool. Armenia's strength was like bars, like places that you can just sit down and chill. Fantastic atmosphere. I really liked the people there. And then the nature was like, the mountains there weren't quite as like high and imposing as they were in Georgia, but they were still very beautiful. It was a country on edge, though. We drove all over. It's a super small country, so we drove basically the entire thing. And the eastern border with Azerbaijan looked like, the Western Front in World War I. It was just from down to Iran all the way up to Georgia, just a continuous stretch of trenches and machine gun nests and artillery positions and bunkers. They're definitely pretty on edge, and I feel like there was some amount of anxiety in the air when I was there. Like people were friendly, but it just sort of seemed like the whole country was on edge a little bit.
Interesting. You said you were talking with people in bars and on park benches and other things. What was the coolest thing that you did there, like the coolest interaction that you had while you were in Armenia?
I went to this bar that was kind of like, if you've ever been to Gabe's in Iowa City, it was kind of like that, but like cooler. And I met this like French Moroccan guy. And
Did you break out the French for that one?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, his English was really good though, so that's mostly what we did. And I'm actually going to see him in December.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I made pretty good friends with this guy while I was there. And then we also, for the school sanctioned trip that we took there, I went back a different time on my own for 4 days. But the school like program trip that we went there on, we actually like sat down and like talked with and interviewed this guy who was like a veteran of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. I mean, that's why we were in both of these countries, really, was to study and like learn about the history and the conflicts and the nationalism and all this stuff. So that was really interesting and like eye-opening to actually talk with someone who was on the front lines of this conflict and who had lost his home and many members of his family to this conflict, that before it was sort of abstract and theoretical, and it was something that was kind of kept at a sanitary distance when we study it in school, and all of a sudden now it's very personal and real and emotional.
And for reference to Nagorno-Karabakh is a territorial dispute between Armenia and Azerbaijan that's resulted in a couple of wars.
Yeah. It was sort of Azerbaijani territory legally, but almost everybody who lived there was ethnically Armenian, and historically it had been like Armenian land. So pretty much, actually, even before the Soviet Union fell apart, there was already conflict there over who it should rightfully belong to.
I like that you highlighted that experience too, of something that seems so far away when we learn about it in classrooms and it gets sanitized. But then when you're actually talking to people, how real it really was. Because when I was in Chile, and I think I've talked about this before, but Chile had a U.S.-backed dictatorship that was probably the most brutal and destructive of all the ones in South America. And it ended in 1993, I believe it was, 1993. And the crazy thing was I was able to interview people who wanted the dictatorship back. Like, they remember the dictatorship and they wanted it back. Mm-hmm. But then I also got to interview people who, like, grew up and saw their family members, their loved ones, their friends get taken away by the actions of the dictatorship. And to actually see that and to hear those stories was so eye-opening to me, because I learned about it in classrooms, but here we don't think about what the real, like, person-to-person effects of things like dictatorships and conflicts are. But then when I actually got to see them, that was a really rocking moment for me.
Yeah, it's sort of like, because we sort of look at things like quantitatively, like X amount of people died, X amount of money was lost, X amount of refugees moved to here, and here. And it's good to know that stuff. I mean, it's important, but it also just totally sanitizes it. It's kind of weird that the suffering of thousands of people means very little to us because you can't even wrap your head around that. But when you actually talk to someone just one-on-one about it, it suddenly becomes so much more real. It's like it goes from something that you know intellectually to something that you like feel intuitively. And like that also happened too. We talked with a guy who was born and raised in Abkhazia, and who was, he's a conflict journalist, and he was shot and mistreated by the Russians in 2008 when they invaded South Ossetia. They shot him. He was unarmed. They took him prisoner. They put him on state TV and basically dubbed over, he's speaking Georgian, and they put a fake Russian dub over it where he like admitted to being a spy, and then eventually they sent him back. That sort of like personal story about this one guy's life experience of all of this stuff was just like so impactful for me. And that's like one of the biggest recommendations I can make about study abroad is like, yes, there's the language, but if you study history or poli-sci or international relations or any stuff like this, it just adds another dimension to it that gives you so much more perspective and like intuitive understanding. It's like you can get the macro level approach in the classroom, but then you can actually go there yourself and talk to people, and you can get like the sort of individual, like microscopic perspective on it.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that as something for study abroad. Like, you should do that to do that. But I want to also add to what you said, because I think, again, what you said was so important in that you also understand more about the world in which you inhabit, like your immediate world. I learned in my time abroad, I learned so much about the world that I was inhabiting here in Iowa, here in the United States.
Yes.
And how different and how unique and how almost safe it is, or I guess not even almost, but like how like safe it is in that, like you said, everything is so sanitized down.
Yeah.
And while I'm thankful to have not had to have grown up in a conflict-torn place, it at the same time, I couldn't have ever understood, even after studying it for years, the trauma and the horror and the emotion, and I will never understand it to that full extent. But to be face to face with it, that was something that made me reflect so hard on my own upbringing and my own world.
Yeah, I mean, the last time we experienced war on our own soil was in the 1860s. I mean, the sort of it kind of leads to a certain, I don't want to be too harsh, but it can lead to a certain like naivete where you don't know what war is really. Like, you don't fully understand what the human cost of it is. And we live in a country that's at war all the time, but it's always far away. And so to go somewhere where, the wounds from that are still fresh, it's like you just understand it so much more. And then on top of that too, on a lighter note, there's the metaphor of like the fish, you can't see the water that they're in. It's like when you step outside of your own culture and then you're looking in on it from the outside, you start to question things that maybe you didn't before. You sort of like have to reevaluate your cultural programming. It's like, why do we do things this way? It just seems normal when you're in it. You step outside of it and you look back and you have some other culture to compare it to, and it's like, there's a different way of doing things. Maybe this makes more sense. Maybe I like this thing more. Maybe there's this aspect of America that we do really well, and you're more appreciative of that.
I think that's a good segue into kind of how I wanted to wrap some of this, because going to Georgia is definitely not traditional whatsoever. And that's part of why I wanted to have you on, was to bring up kind of a non-traditional, very unique opportunity. But in addition to what you said of, again, the opening the eyes and the perspective, and I've said it so many times on this show, but it's a lot of the times it's been very glossy. I try to have it not be cliche, but it ends up being cliche of just like, oh, other cultures and other things, where, and every country does have their skeletons in their closet, every culture, but especially one like Georgian, the South Caucasus region. But what are how would you advertise studying abroad in Georgia, or what would you tell people that they need to know, like advice, other things, whether or not they're someone just going to study Russian or even just looking at programs going to Georgia in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons to go to Georgia. It's basically like, I think the Garden of Eden was inspired by Georgia. You know, the story of the Garden of Eden. It's just unbelievably beautiful. The soil is just so productive. You know, beautiful vineyards, the healthiest forests I've ever seen. The food is fantastic. But it's also a country that is on the front lines of geopolitics. There are competing forces, both internal and external, that are trying to push Georgia towards the West and democracy and the EU and, you know, more trade with the world, and forces that are trying to pull it back towards Russia and into autocracy and a police state, you know, is explicitly like anti-gay and has some pretty extreme reactionary views. And it's also a country where there are a lot of different cultures present and several different languages. I mean, English, Russian, and Georgian are used everywhere. So I'd say that there's just a lot, like pretty much whatever you want to study, I think you can find it there. You know, if you're interested in history, super ancient history.
And we got the history of wine too.
Yeah, if you're interested in like culinary arts, it would be a fantastic place to study that. If you went to like a culinary school in Georgia, dude, you would own the game. If you want to look at politics and this East versus West and past versus future kind of forces that are pulling the country in opposite directions, you can study that. If you want to study languages, you can study Russian or Georgian or even like Azerbaijani or like Turkish or something. Like you can study any of those languages there. You can go to medical school there. It's accredited here. Like you can do anything you want there.
You can do anything you want. You can study what you want, and you can get maybe not even a glossy experience like some other study abroad locations and destinations might be, where it's real and we're not going to put anything on it.
Yeah, no, it doesn't sort of have like the glamour of like going to like France or Italy, but I think it's every bit as like beautiful and cultured, and the sort of things that attract people to those like flashy countries I think are still present in Georgia. It might not look as like, you know, there's more poverty and it's visible and you can see that this country has problems, but I think that actually adds to the experience rather than detracting from it.
And that's why I've got you here. I want to put more people on game about Georgia. I would really love to travel to Georgia someday. Yeah. I think that would be an amazing opportunity. So we're getting closer to the end here. So I'm gonna rapid fire a couple things at you. Food. We talked about kind of the Georgian wine game, but I want to talk about food. So what was the best or most interesting food that you had, not only from Georgia but also from your travels in Armenia and Azerbaijan?
Yeah, I actually don't really remember that much about the food we ate in Azerbaijan. It was good. I think it was basically like Turkish food though. Like they're very similar culturally and linguistically. The best Armenian food I had, it was so good. It's lahmacun. It's people call it like Armenian pizza. It's like a very thin, crispy flatbread with like spiced minced meat and vegetables, and it is so good. I've been looking for it back here. Can't find it.
Any Armenians here, hit Sean Hagan up.
Yeah, dude, all my Armenians and Georgians in Iowa City, please come find me. I need your guys' food, all right? And then in Georgia, I think my favorite, it's hard to choose one favorite, but my two favorite foods there was Ajari and Khachapuri. Ajara is like the Batumi region. They're like more like Muslim. They have some of their own foods. And that's like, it's sort of like a boat-shaped loaf of bread that has like cheese and butter and like eggs like baked into it, and it's like it's like melted, and you like break a piece off of the outside and dip it in. So good. And then potato and cheese khinkali. They're like these just like dough dumplings. Usually they're filled with like broth and meat, so you actually like drink the broth.
So it's one of those kind of deals. I know those have become like more and more popular as of late, but like it's one of those kind of deals.
Yeah, it's like so you take the dumpling, you bite into it, and then you like drink the broth. Super cool, and then you like eat it. This might be heresy, but I actually like the potato and cheese ones more that didn't have the broth in them. It was
Interesting.
yeah. It was just like really good, like salted and buttered mashed potatoes and cheese in a dough package. Is so good.
I had those kind of dumplings in Chinatown in Montreal one time, and they were good, but I burned my mouth on the broth like really bad. I was like, "Oh, I'm hungry. These look great.
Yeah.
I'm gonna poke a hole in it, let it drain out for a second, then put it in." And I just like completely burned my tongue. I couldn't really taste what was left in there.
Yeah.
So I think I'd be a little apprehensive on that. But if it was mashed potatoes and cheese, this sounds like a good game. I mean, I'd eat any Georgian food you put in front of me.
Yeah, the normal like broth and meat khinkali are kind of not for beginners. It it actually takes a little bit of practice to like get good at eating them.
Did your host family have to be like, okay, Sean, like
Yeah.
we'll work you up to this?
Well, not like work me up, but they like when we first got there and like the program organizers were kind of like getting us settled in. They're like, here's like a step by step. Like this is how you eat khinkali. You have to do it this way. Like they'll look at you weird if you like don't do it this way. If you like bite into it and let all the broth just like fall out, they're gonna be like, you're wasting it. You're doing it wrong.
Well, it's kind of like the opposite when you go to France or anywhere that serves escargot. They give you all the stuff and expect that you know how to eat it, but then when you don't, you just look like an idiot because you're like trying to pick at it, and there's like the clamps that they have for it.
Yeah.
And it's almost like they want to watch you. That's funny that they had to like teach you how to eat. I'm glad that they did it so you wouldn't look like an
Yeah.
idiot, but they have to teach you how to eat a good cultural food.
Yeah, one thing that I kind of liked about, I mean, the hospitality culture there is, it's so nice. Hospitality is just like a huge part of their culture. You know, they really just want to go above and beyond for their guests. But they also don't have like an expectation that if you're a foreigner, you're going to know all of their ways. You know, I think they're pretty understanding that it's like, yeah, we're a small country. You know, a lot of people don't even know we exist. And so they tell you what you need to know, which is nice.
That's good. I definitely want to talk more about the Georgian food game at some point. We're running out of time here. Maybe we convince the ambassador to let us have a food day at the end of the simulation. Who knows? So wrapping all of this up, what is the one song that encapsulated your time in Georgia? First time, second time, or it could be multiple songs, but what is like the one song that you got?
Yeah, I would say the song that really sums up the feel. Like when I listen to it, I just think about my time there is Kalakuri by Mgzavrebi.
Can't say I'm familiar.
No. Maybe in the episode description we can write that out. It'll be hard for people to type that out by ear. But yeah, you guys should give it a listen. It kind of just sounds like Tbilisi and the trees and the vines and the art and the music. It reminds me of all that good stuff.
Peak Georgia vibes. Yeah, you'll definitely have to send it to me. I'll link it in the description. So yeah, you can get in on what it sounds like to be in Tbilisi, Georgia. I am really thankful that you've come and you've shared to us Georgia, because again, not a place that really anybody knows about. Obviously, it's a place more people need to go about, need to travel to. If you have the opportunity to study there, to travel there, you should definitely do it again. I'm ready to go to Georgia right now. I want to go to Georgia. I think that would be awesome. So, Sean, again, I want to thank you, but I also want to give you this opportunity to plug yourself. What are you doing? What are you a part of here on campus? What do you want the people to know about Sean Hagan right now?
Well, I am a DJ for KRUI, the university radio program, 89.7 FM. I have a show every Friday from 7 to 8 called Radio Vostok, and I play music that I discovered while I was abroad. So there's some Georgian music, there's some Armenian, stuff from all over Eastern Europe and, former Yugoslavia. So come give it a listen. Fridays, 7 to 8, KRUI.
Balkan states of former Yugoslavia, Armenians, Georgians, hit my man Sean Hagan up. Anyway, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on to talk about this. And yeah, we will link all of your things down in the description below. Go listen. As someone I used to DJ at KRUI as well. I had a sports show, not nearly as cool, I don't think, as Armenian show tunes, but I will link to all that down below. Check all of Sean's stuff out. But this was a great episode. I'm so thankful, and we will see y'all wherever and whenever in the world next time. Thanks for listening.